Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. You know, have you guys ever been curious to know what the second oldest running nameplate here is in America? I'll give you a hint, it's actually not American. This week I'm testing that exact vehicle, and as you can see as I walk right by it, this is the 2021 Toyota Land Cruiser. More specifically, this is the Land Cruiser Heritage Edition, because as you guys probably have guessed, this vehicle has been in the Toyota nameplate here in the States for over 60 years. It's one of the reasons why Toyota came out with this Heritage model. And as you guys know, this current generation 200 series Land Cruiser has been around since 2008. It definitely has the same kind of military heritage lineage that we have basically in Jeeps. This is Toyota's version of a Jeep that came out back in the 1940s. And this week we're going to go over the Land Cruiser Heritage model. We're going to go over some of the differences, and we're going to find out what exactly makes the Heritage version of the Land Cruiser basically a rolling history lesson on wheels. Now, unlike the American branded competition, Toyota is very guilty for selling a lot of old trucks here in the States. However, the Land Cruiser is designed to be the flagship of all of those old trucks. This generation, as I said, has been out since 2008. Now, that may be a long time in car years. However, the Land Cruiser itself has been around for the last 60 years, 60 plus years. It's been through 9 generations. And this Land Cruiser here is basically very different versus the Land Cruisers that we saw back in the 1950s when this generation, or when this nameplate first came out. Remember, that was an entirely different vehicle. Today's modern Land Cruiser is very much a much more luxurious, safety-oriented, tech-oriented, and family-oriented vehicle. This is one of the bigger SUVs, truck-based SUVs that you can buy today. And as you can see, looking at the design of the Heritage model, you're going to probably notice right away a couple of things. It's got this really cool Yakima roof rack, or Yakima basket at the top of that thing. It's usually like $400 if you guys want to buy those in the aftermarket. In addition to these beautiful looking gold BBS 18-inch wheels, I actually really like the wheels and this white color combination. But the coolest thing about the Land Cruiser Heritage Edition is this badge right here. This is very much a throwback to the 1950 series FJ40 Land Cruisers, and I think that's probably the coolest thing. Everybody really looks at this truck. Even though it's super old, it's been on the market for some time right now, it still gets a lot of attention. You can see the Land Cruiser is definitely not the small vehicle that it was back in the 1940s. This thing is 195 inches long, it's 78 inches wide, and at around 78 inches tall, plus another 6.5 inches for that Yakima roof or basket on the top. This is a pretty big vehicle, and it's going to feel that way when you're going down the road. Now let's look at the front fascia of the latest Land Cruiser, because Toyota has actually given this thing 2 refreshes since it came out in 2008. 2016 was the most recent refresh. That's when they gave it this new front fascia with these full LED headlights. Although you have an LED low and high beam, you also have an LED daytime running light. The turn signals, however, are incandescent. I actually like the way this refresh looks. When it first came out back in 2016. You also have these LED fog lights down here, which definitely modernized the appearance of the Land Cruiser. The Heritage model does include some dark chrome pieces at the front, as opposed to the regular Land Cruiser, which has the bright chrome work. This one has been kind of blacked out. The side mirrors have also been blacked out. And you can see down here at the lower fog light housing, that also has some black chrome to it, which definitely makes it look a little bit more aggressive. The wheels on this vehicle are 18 inches in diameter. As I said, they're wrapped in 2 85/60 series tires. Now, of course, these tires have a lot of sidewall protection, because this vehicle obviously can go off-roading. It's one of the, defining characteristics of a Land Cruiser. In fact, Toyota says with the fixed suspension, with the adaptive variables, you get around just under 9 inches of ground clearance, which is actually a lot. It seems like it has much more than that. However, some of the competitors, like the new GMC Yukon with the AT4 package, have an adjustable air suspension that can raise it up to over 10 inches. So Toyota obviously is starting to fall behind a little bit in that. However, you still have all of your skid plates, a locking center differential, and that's going to give this truck, of course, that tough off-road ready character. Now above here you can see no panel roof is available on a Land Cruiser. Instead, you just have a standard sunroof, and as I mentioned earlier, that Yakima basket on top definitely adds to the cool factor, although it is going to affect the noise levels when we're out on the highway. I'll talk about that later on during the driving scene. Now, looking at the rear, you can see these are the refreshed taillights that they introduced back in 2016. You have LED brake lights and LED taillights, but the turn signal and the reverse light is just an incandescent. The tag lights are surprisingly LED. There's a big old V8 badge at the back of this thing to remind everyone this thing is a gas-thirsty pig out on the road. And overall, it's got that traditional boxy shape to it, which a lot of people like. Now remember, Land Cruisers come with a split opening tailgate, and Toyota did add a power function a couple years ago. This is very similar to what you find in a Range Rover. However, the tailgate itself is a little bit on the slow side as it opens up, but at least they finally added a power opening tailgate. The split part down here is actually just a manual opening and closing, but it's nice how they do this because look at the opening of this vehicle when you do have the rear tailgate open. Toyota says the Heritage model actually comes standard with only five passenger configuration. They removed the third row for 2020. For 2021, you can actually option back in the third row for another $1,300, which would make this thing a 7-passenger seating configuration. Although without the third row, you can see plenty of cargo space. You get around 42 cubic feet of space. If you fold down the second row, Toyota says that expands it to around 82 cubic feet, which is actually not very much considering the size of this vehicle. It's a little bit more than what you get in a Toyota Highlander. If you need more space, make sure you look at the Toyota Sequoia. That's about a foot longer versus the Land Cruiser. So the exterior of the 2021 Land Cruiser Heritage still looks good. A lot of people may disagree with me on that, but I think it's actually still a good looking vehicle. But what about the interior? This is where, again, Toyota has made improvements over the years. However, when you get into this vehicle, it's going to, again, throw you back in 2010, a decade ago, because Toyota just hasn't been able to keep up with all of the latest updates that they've been showing us in all their newer models. Now my tester here with the white exterior just has the black interior. You can see Toyota did improve this interior back in 2016 where they added that 9-inch touchscreen over there. The door panel you can see has this very large handle here to open and close the door. There's these nice aluminum look grab handles. There's some nice wood grain look trim. You have 3-person memory seats. The seats themselves are a 10-way power adjustment and they are heated and cooled, which is nice. When I shut the door, the door actually still has a very nice solid sounding thunk. Now it's obviously not Mercedes G-Wagon solid sounding where it sounds like a gun cocking itself, but it's still a very nice sound to it. Now you can see the Land Cruiser does get its own unique key fob. This is Toyota's Intelligent Access key. This is actually the same key that Toyota decided to use on the RAV4 Prime, which is a nice key. I wish Toyota would use this key in all of their models. It's just much better looking, more substantial feeling than everything else. The button to fire up the engine is over here. And you can see it's got a powered tilt and telescoping steering wheel, which is also heated. And the gauges, they are very classic looking. I actually think they look great, but they're also very dated. You have a very small 3-inch screen there with traditional analog dials. Some of you will, again, prefer the analog look because it's just kind of easy to get in this vehicle and know exactly what you're looking at. I also like the way the steering wheel looks, surprisingly. It's got this nice, fake stitching over the leather cover. You have this wood grain trim. I like how the wheel is also heated. The leather feels high quality on the actual wheel, which is nice. You have turn signal stalks and switches which are older, and for some reason the Land Cruiser does not have the 3 blink function if you guys are changing lanes. So again, constant reminder that this is an old vehicle. I think Toyota should have just added that. They could have easily done that in all the refreshes that they decided to give this vehicle. Now looking at the rest of this interior here, you can see for a vehicle that costs $80,000+, the interior is nice, but I wouldn't say it's probably worth that money. See the dashboard here, you can see is a soft touch injection molded plastic. Same thing over on this side. However, if you guys are looking for like real stitching and real leather on the dash, it's just not on this vehicle. You do have some nice leather stitching over here where your knees could potentially hit that area. And it also is nice and padded, which is nice. The 9-inch touchscreen is a good size, although it's lacking Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is really, really disappointing. That's what the home screen looks like. You can see it's the older Toyota system. I guess they don't even call it Entune anymore. If you go to setup here, you can see everything is just very, very old. At least it's a touchscreen though, because remember the Lexus version of this vehicle has their Lexus remote touchpad interface without Android Auto and CarPlay again, but you have a 12-inch display as opposed to this 9-inch display. When I put the vehicle into reverse, you can see it does have a nice 360 camera, and it looks like they've actually sort of tried to improve the graphics, but it still doesn't look great, especially on their flagship SUV. I think Toyota, again, needs to continue to work on that. You have dual zone climate control, quad zone climate control, which is of course nice. You have this really old display here for your clock, your outside temp. You have 2 knobs here for volume and tuning, which is nice. There's an area here where you could potentially put your phone, but as you can see, here's my iPhone 12 Pro Max, and it barely fits in there. Actually, it doesn't fit in there because I can't close it, but at least it's almost deep enough to fit something like that. Over here, you can see you have your heated and cooled seat controls, your heated steering wheel controls. There's an automatic setting. There's your full-time 4-wheel drive setting. And then, of course, because this is a real off-road vehicle, you have a low range transfer case, 4 high, which is this vehicle is always in 4 high. You also have a power mode here. You have an ability to make the transmission start in second. There's your locking center differential, and this vehicle has crawl control where you can select all different kinds of terrain that you're driving on. And you also have off-road turn assist, where this vehicle will kind of lock the inside rear wheel and help the vehicle drag to cut the turning radius in half, which is handy considering how big it is when you're taking it off-roading. Over here you have traditional handbrake over here, which is nice. And then you have these two cup holders here with this aluminum look trim. The Heritage model does delete the cool box that's in here. So instead of the cool box, instead of that, you have a lot more storage, which is still a little bit on the shallow side considering how big this center console storage is. I do like the seats. I think they're plush. They're very comfortable and supportive. They're very, very cushy, especially the leather. It feels really high quality. And then above me, you can see just a standard sunroof. Toyota doesn't even offer a panel roof on this vehicle. And then if you open up this, you can see the glove box is bigger. It's damped, but not lined with felt. But overall, storage, considering how big this vehicle is lacking a tad, but you do have this beautiful commanding view of the road, which is a Land Cruiser hallmark. And you also have Toyota Safety Sense Plus. However, it's not their 2.0 system, so it's not their latest, but you do have adaptive cruise control with pedestrian detection, and you have lane departure alert, but not active lane keep assist. And you also have blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert. Now, the Land Cruiser is a fairly large vehicle on the outside. However, you'd be surprised to hear that it's not very space efficient on the interior. That's because this thing has a body-on-frame design. It still has a live axle in the back, so that does intrude on the space, especially when you look at the second row of this vehicle. Now, remember, my tester here does not have the third row seat option, so it's only a 5-seater. And when I get back here, you can see it's also a very high step because there's no running boards with that 9 inches of ground clearance. But you know, even though Toyota says you only get around 35 or 34.5 inches of legroom back here, at 5'7", I actually find it to be pretty spacious. As you can see, getting back here, the legroom, while it is only 34.5 inches, actually is pretty good, although there's not very much foot space underneath the front seats here. When I shut the door itself still sounds pretty solid. In terms of the materials, Toyota did carry over the soft touch plastic materials and the leather stitching and these big, grab handles back here. Now, I'm surprised to see that the floor is flat back here in the center, which is nice for 3 people across. Remember, this vehicle is 78 inches wide, so you can easily fit 3 people across. Toyota also gives you your set of rear seat air vents, dual zone climate back here. Actually, it's got 4-zone climate. Heated seats back here as well, which is always nice. And then down here, there's a power outlet, but no USB ports, but you do get 2 map pockets there. And then there's a nice armrest here that folds down, which is a pretty substantial armrest. Some nice storage. And then you can see your cup holders are actually these pop-out cup holders over here. The seats themselves, they fold down, obviously. They also recline, and I also like the soft leather. This is one of the softer leather that Toyota uses, which doesn't surprise me considering the price tag of this vehicle. You even have LED lighting back here, but if you're looking for that rear seat entertainment system that's in the regular Land Cruiser, it's not found on the Heritage model, which is kind of okay for me. Now, underneath the hood of the 2021 Land Cruiser, Toyota hasn't made any changes once again. This is the same powertrain, which is essentially a bulletproof powertrain as the Toyota Tundra. Toyota's been building this V8 for quite some time now, probably almost 2 decades now. And it's a 5.7 liter naturally aspirated V8 with their port injection. It doesn't even have direct injection, but it does have variable valve timing technology. It still makes 381 horsepower and 401 pound-feet of torque. The power output of this trails the Lexus version of this vehicle by 2 horsepower. Remember, the Lexus LX 570 offers a total of 383 horsepower. Now, of course, back in 2016, Toyota actually replaced the old 6-speed automatic and put in an 8-speed automatic. So this is what makes this powertrain different versus the one you find in the Tundra. You have 2 more gears. And fuel economy is pretty abysmal, even by big SUV standards. This thing is rated to get 13 in the city and 17 on the highway. Thankfully, it's not hit with a gas guzzler tax because it's a truck. And if you guys are looking to tow, the Land Cruiser will tow a maximum of 8,100 pounds. Now, as this one sits, it's also a pretty heavy vehicle. It contributes to, again, the poor fuel economy. It weighs in at around 5,715 pounds. The Heritage model is actually a little bit lighter than the regular Land Cruiser because they removed that 3rd row. But if you add that 3rd row back in, it's going to make it pretty heavy. 0 to 60 time should be in the 7-second range, which makes it pretty competitive. But as you guys know, this vehicle is definitely considered a gas hog in today's modern world. I'll be curious to see what Toyota does with the next generation model, if they even decide to bring one back for the 2023 or 2024 model year. So I'm pretty familiar with this generation Land Cruiser. Toyota has practically loaned me one almost every year over the last couple of years. So obviously this is no modern SUV when it drives. It feels big and heavy. I like the fact that, however, it gives you all of this ground clearance. You also have a standard full-time four-wheel drive system with a low-range transfer case. This car still drives very nice. It just constantly feels like I can basically use this vehicle if there's ever an apocalypse. I could run over things with this vehicle, potholes, rocks, whatever. It just has a ton of ground clearance. It's got these big meaty tires. It has this amazing commanding view of the road, which really helps with the visibility. Visibility out of this truck is really excellent. And you also have these big windows, big side mirrors. You have the Toyota Safety Sense, which is standard, but it's not their latest generation. And I also like the power. This, remember, continues to use the 5.7 liter V8 with, however, the 8-speed auto, which does make this vehicle feel like it accelerates better versus the last Tundra that I drove. It's just a nice driving, smooth driving SUV, but if you're looking for something that's obviously going to attack corners, this is not the vehicle for you. It does constantly feel heavy and big and wallowy. The suspension, it's like marshmallow soft. This vehicle will kind of glide over bumps and whatnot, which is good if you guys are trying to have a really comfortable ride quality, but I did notice at times, if you are on road surfaces that are, very smooth, it can feel a little bit, cushy to the point where it makes me feel like almost motion sickness. Now there is a power mode here in the transmission, which I haven't seen one of those in so long. The fact that this vehicle still uses that. When you do that, it puts the transmission into a kind of like a sport setting. There's also a dedicated sport setting in the gear lever. When I flop this over to manual mode, we'll just floor it and we'll see how it accelerates. Ooh. Nice. The suspension is so soft on this vehicle that it literally like shoves you back in the seat, and you can feel the whole back end squat down because that's how soft it is. It feels like it gets to 60 in around 6.9, 6.8 seconds. It's pretty quick, honestly. But obviously you're gonna find, those EcoBoost Expeditions or a Lincoln Navigator to be faster. Range Rovers with their supercharged V8s are gonna be faster. But you have to admire Toyota for continuing to use this powertrain. It's going to be dead reliable, which is pretty important, especially when you guys are looking to buy a Land Cruiser. A lot of people consider reliability. They want that to be a huge factor. When I put my foot down to the floor there, you can feel the transmission is a little bit more responsive than the 6-speed auto that's in the Tundra, of course, but it also is still a little bit slow to shift. It's very smooth. You're not going to really notice the transmission in the background. You're just going to notice that the engine is smooth. It makes a nice sound. It's willing. It's a good match for this vehicle, which is impressive considering it's been out for so long now. It shows that Toyota, when they put this powertrain in this vehicle, really over-engineered it to kind of be ahead of its time, because today it's still pretty adequate. So I'm curious to know, obviously where the next generation is going to go. Now, in terms of the steering feel, the Land Cruiser has very light steering that also is very slow ratio, which is important for off-roading, not great for driving out on the road because the vehicle just kind of wallows about. It doesn't respond very well to my steering inputs, which is about to be expected basically with a truck-based SUV like this. And then the brakes on this vehicle also require some getting used to. When you first hit the brakes, it almost feels like you're stepping on a wet sponge because they're spongy. It doesn't grab very hard. You hit them a little bit harder and it kind of grabs the whole vehicle. It's very difficult to drive this vehicle smoothly or brake smoothly. Now, getting up to highway speeds, you can hear that Yakima roof basket, which is creating wind noise at around 60 miles an hour. Even with the sunroof closed or the sunshade closed, you're still going to hear that noise. So some of you who want the quietest Land Cruiser interior, you're going to want to not get this Heritage model or have the dealer remove that Yakima basket on the roof because it's obviously adding height. It also adds wind noise, drag. It's going to lower your fuel economy, but it looks cool. So that's kind of the reason why, one of the reasons why Toyota decided to do that. Now, in terms of fuel economy, it's pretty poor, pretty piss poor actually. This truck in my week's worth of testing is averaging around 10 miles to the gallon, which is abysmal. And it's got a 25-gallon fuel tank, And on a full tank, it's only showing around 275 miles of range. 275 miles of range is awful, pitiful, atrocious. I remember I had a Tundra a couple weeks ago, and that had a 38-gallon gas tank and was showing 550 miles of range. So again, more range, but very expensive gas bill. Toyota, you really need to do something about this, so we'll have to wait and see what they do for the next generation model. In terms of the driver assistance, I actually turn off the lane departure alert because all it does is just beep like that and not steer whenever you're driving this thing on, you know, roads. Anytime you get close to the lane markers, and with this very slow steering, you're going to be constantly making steering corrections, which is just annoying, but it's part of driving a truck like this. But overall, the Land Cruiser is still a nice driving truck, but it really shows its age when you start pushing it, when you start, you know, coming out of modern SUVs, because SUVs just don't drive like this anymore. They drive a lot like cars, even the truck-based one. And this one is a constant reminder that you're driving a truck, although it still continues to feel like a tank. So despite the age of the current generation 200 series Land Cruiser, driving around this vehicle for the last few days, it's a constant reminder of Toyota's military lineage. Remember, the Land Cruiser was built to take on the American Jeep in the war when when the Japanese needed a vehicle during the Korean War. I have to say, even though the Land Cruiser is very, very old, the Heritage model still has a lot of appeal, especially to enthusiasts, especially if you guys are a Land Cruiser enthusiast. This thing, you can tell when you drive it, feels like a tank. It feels like it's going to last for hundreds of thousands of miles. It's still very comfortable. It's still very spacious. It's still very capable, especially off-road. And really where it suffers is in the technology department, the handling department, and of course the fuel economy department. And it makes me wonder, what in the heck is Toyota going to do with the next generation Land Cruiser? There's rumors that Toyota is going to discontinue this vehicle all entirely, or bring it back as an entirely different beast designed to go head-to-head with something like a Jeep Wrangler. I'm kind of hoping they decide to bring it back as a Jeep Wrangler competitor, make it smaller, make it more off-road oriented, make it less luxury focused, make it a lot more affordable, because as you guys know, the Lexus version of this vehicle actually outsells the Land Cruiser. Toyota does roughly around 3,000 units of these every year in the States. Lexus does double that. They do 5,000 to 6,000 units, and it doesn't surprise me when you consider the price. This car starts at $85,000 for a base version, at about $1,800 for the Heritage model, as you guys see here. Plus the color that my tester is with the Blizzard Pearl and the destination charge, and you're looking at just under $90,000. 90 grand for this old relic, and that makes it very hard to justify, especially considering the fact that you can get something a lot more modern, a lot more, or similarly capable, a lot more comfortable, and a lot more fuel efficient for the money. Now, of course, some of you will argue, well, they won't last as long as the Land Cruiser, and you are very true, because this thing is so old, it's built to last easily 300,000 miles, 15, 20 plus years with very little problems. Now, with all that said, would I consider buying one of these vehicles if I actually had the money? Probably not. I would consider looking at one of these used. However, if you guys are looking to buy the Heritage model, this is one that probably will end up turning into a collector's version. Toyota said they were only building about 1,200 of these for the 2020 model year. I'm actually surprised to see it back for the 2021 model year, where they added the third row seat option. I'd estimate, again, they're going to limit production to around 50% of what the actual sales are in America. So if you guys want a Land Cruiser, you're an enthusiast, you want something that could eventually, potentially become a collector's item in the future, be sure to put this on your list, but just also be sure there's plenty of other choices out there for the similar money or less money. That's just a far easier vehicle to live with on a daily basis. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2021 Toyota Land Cruiser Heritage Edition. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.